first factor are the overnight low temperatures. Over the next weekend and into early next week, from Saturday night through Monday night, the low temperatures are not going to fall below 75 degrees in the city of Chicago. In fact, in parts of the city where the urban heat island effect is most pronounced, that low temperature is not going to fall below 80 degrees. And when you factor in the humidity, which is going to stay the same through this whole heat wave, the heat index, what it feels like, is going to feel like it's greater than 80 degrees through the whole heat wave for more than 72 hours. And that gets into factor number 2. That's the duration of this heat wave. We're looking at 3 to 4 days of dangerous heat. And heat impacts are cumulative. You can go through 1 day of dangerous heat, usually okay, but once you get to days 2, 3, and 4, that's when it really starts to impact our bodies, especially when we can't cool off at night with those really warm and humid conditions. Now, the third factor is acclimation. It's not unusual to get a heat wave in Chicago or the Great Lakes this time of year, but this is the first heat wave of this year. The last time we saw hot and humid conditions like what we're expecting was last August. That's 10 months ago. And we're coming off a relatively cool spring where we had onshore flow off Lake Michigan. Lake Michigan is not going to stop this heat wave.
And so we want all of us to navigate through this safely. And joining us now to discuss the health risks of this heat is Dr. Joshua Sherman, an emergency medicine physician with Advocate Medical Group. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you all for having me.
We know that this is something that should not be taken lightly. We've been waiting for the heat to come. But if you can kind of help us break down what seems to be the biggest problems, why does the moist air, the humidity make the temperatures even more dangerous?
Well, in the most basic of terms, because our body relies on a bit of a temperature gradient and humidity gradient, if you will, in order to prevent our body itself from overheating. And so we often cool by means of an evaporative heat loss, and at extremes of temperature, extremes of humidity, our body loses that ability to sweat, which is what we would normally rely upon. When our body does that and we end up in various stages of this heat-related illness that can, range anywhere from heat exhaustion characterized by excessive sweating, sometimes nausea, lightheadedness, up to heat stroke, which is the much more dangerous form of heat-related illness, which is sort of characterized, if you will, by dysfunction of our nervous system. We get confused. We sometimes have altered mental status. We don't know who we are, where we are, up to seizure, coma, at which point, the treatment is very, very aggressive, often requires ICU admission to the hospital. And unfortunately, it's something that we often, or we see far too often, is when it's easily preventable.
Dr. Sherman, we often hear people say hydrate, drink plenty of water, stay away from alcohol, stay away from caffeine. But what about people that can't avoid taking their medications? What kind of precautions can they take during this? Because we know that sometimes some medications work by dehydrating the body.
Yep, absolutely. There are certainly various medical conditions that are diuretics, if you will, that, antihypertensive or blood pressure medications that cause us to maybe urinate a bit more frequently. And in those particular patients, I think, the most important thing is to be cognizant of the time that you're spending outdoors in these extremes of heat. If and when possible, I would try to avoid excessive heat exposure. If you are not able to do that, though, I think, the most important thing would be to continue to monitor your fluid intake despite taking those medications, right? You're going to look at things such as the amount that you're sweating. You're going to ensure that your urine is, ideally with a pale yellow or clear color. You are sweating. You're not feeling excessively hot without the ability to mount that sweat mechanism. So all of those things are sort of indicators, if not present, that you may be becoming too dehydrated. You need to seek out a cooling center, increase your fluid intake, consider supplementation with electrolyte containing solutions too, be that sugar-free Gatorade, Pedialyte, and those sorts of drinks as well.
A lot of people think, okay, this is the perfect time to head to the beach, get in the water, it's going to be great. But that can actually pose another risk that people don't think about. And that's something that you guys call beach feet. What is that? What are the symptoms?
Beach feet, people, I think, have various definitions of beach feet. The one that comes to mind, I think that's most commonly referred to is excessive exposure to water of your feet. If you are at the beach for excessive amounts of time and you are you start to develop that sort of soggy appearance of your skin, which can also predispose you to increased dehydration from the salt content of some of the lake water. There are others who refer to beach feet as the sort of predisposing your feet to more heat-related injury from the direct sunlight or sun exposure. You have the wet foot that you've soaked in this salt water. The skin is a bit dehydrated already. Now you're spending excessive time on the beach, and you can start to develop, blistering of the skin and that sort of thing as well. So all of these are things that we need to be aware of, especially in the summer months such as these, when, as you're alluding to, everyone wants to be outside, everyone wants to have fun. Stay hydrated, I think, is the most important thing. Supplement that hydration with electrolyte containing solutions. Monitor your skin for signs of sunburn, blistering, excessive pain, and despite not having injured yourself. The skin, is not the only organ that gets affected by this excessive heat exposure, although it's often talked about, but your heart, your kidneys, your brain, your muscles, pretty much every single organ system has the potential of being adversely affected by excessive heat exposure, which is why it's time that, it's a timely reminder as we approach this heat wave to be cognizant of these things. Look for it in your loved ones. Be careful remember to check on those vulnerable populations, those elderly neighbors, elderly family members. Check in on them every now and then. Don't leave our kids in the car. It's, something that we unfortunately encounter in our emergency department sometimes during these very hot months. And if there's any doubt, seek immediate medical attention. We'd rather you be overly cautious or you come into the hospital a little bit too soon than to have you waited out at home or wherever you are and try and self-diagnose.
All right, Dr. Joshua Sherman, emergency medicine physician with Advocate Medical Group. Thank you so much. You've been very thorough. Thank you for joining our newscast.
Thank you. Have a good day.